Canada has introduced new measures aimed at speeding up resettlement in this country. More than 6,000 Ukrainians have already arrived since January. And just this morning, I spoke with the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, Sean Fraser. Minister, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure as always, Rosemary. Thank you.
So you've said there's no limit to the number of applications you're willing to accept. I just want to be clear on, does that mean you will accept an unlimited number of people, or is that just the application process?
No, that's the number of people. Now, one of the reasons we're able to do that is because we built a new stream on the system that typically welcomes visitors to Canada. We're used to processing more than 2 million applications a year through this system. So we have the capacity to do it, particularly since we removed some of the ordinary barriers that might lead to a refusal. But for people who are willing to come and spend up to 2 years here, and eventually with a plan to go back when it's safe to do so, we're not placing a limit on the number of people we're willing to provide safe harbor to who are fleeing this war of aggression.
Your immigration plan for this year had been to accept about 77,000 refugees, I believe, and protected persons. Would these applications be on top of that? Because between Afghanistan and now Ukraine, that does seem to be some potentially bigger numbers.
It is, and I think it's really important that we understand that this is not a typical refugee resettlement plan. When we engaged with the Ukrainian Canadian community, they made very clear to us that the vast majority of people who are coming here want to go back when it's safe to do so. So these people are coming in as visitors to Canada, although for an extended period, and we're tying work permits to it so they can support themselves, but they're not impacting our overall refugee numbers because they're not being resettled permanently.
Okay. I know you've had this question a lot this week, but I will ask it again, and that, of course, is around the visa requirements and why Canada didn't just remove visas. Can you explain why that is, and would that not have made things faster if you had removed them entirely?
That was one of my first reactions as well, and it was one of the first options that I actually considered in determining how we should proceed to get the most number of people here as quickly as possible. When I dug into it, I realized that visa-free travel would require us to implement a new regime that would involve regulatory changes and IT changes across 3 different government departments, and potentially for private sector airlines as well. And when we looked at it, the assessed timeline to implement that kind of a system would have been 12 to 14 weeks. I didn't think we had 12 to 14 weeks. So we used the existing visitor regime and pulled off a lot of the barriers that would lead to a person's refusal. And we should be able to have this system up and running within a couple of weeks. And in the meanwhile, we've been processing people on an expedited basis since January. And from the beginning of the year, we've already seen 6,265 people arrive in Canada. This is the fastest and safest way to get people here. And that was my motivation.
I guess, what is Canada prepared to do to get these people here? So many people, a million and a half people have now fled Ukraine. They're in other countries, obviously. Would Canada be prepared to send over planes? Would you facilitate their travel here? What kinds of things are we prepared to do to help on the ground?
So we're working across different ministries right now to understand what we can do to help facilitate the travel for people to get here. So far, we're seeing that there hasn't been an obstacle for people to land. And a lot of the people who fled Ukraine have chosen to take up safe haven in some of the countries to the western border of Ukraine. We're working right now with industry across different ministries to figure out the extent to which some kind of air travel or facilitation may be necessary. But we should have more to report on that in the next few weeks.
Okay, I noticed overnight the government is now telling Canadians to get out of Russia, given all the flight restrictions that have been placed in Russia. How can Canadians actually get out? Is the government looking at providing any assistance to Canadians in that case?
Obviously, there's a challenging diplomatic situation when it comes to facilitating the exit of people from Russia. Our advice right now is to find whatever way you can to leave Russia. We have some real concerns about the safety and well-being of people who may be in Russia today, and that's the reason for the Change Travel Advisory. We're going to continue to work through Consular Affairs and Minister Jolie's department to keep Canadians informed of the situation on the ground, and to the extent that there are opportunities to help facilitate their travel, we'll be making that known. But our advice right now is to find ways to exit however you can.
Just to go back to Ukrainians who may want to come to Canada, I realize that the program, as you've announced it, hasn't opened yet. It'll be a couple of weeks. But do you have a sense of numbers? I would imagine there are already calls and emails from Canadians who have Ukrainian roots and others who are looking for to know, if they can come. Do you have a sense of volume?
We don't know what the total volume is going to be because we've built the program around an ability to respond to whatever demand it receives. To put it into perspective, we do have some real world data. We started preparing for this as of January 19th, moving biometrics units into the region, moving people into the region so we could process large numbers of cases. And so far, since the beginning of January, we've seen 6,265 people arrive. There's another 3,288 applications that have been submitted so far. So if we can extrapolate those numbers, I think we're looking certainly in the thousands, potentially tens of thousands, but we won't know with certainty what the total number is until we actually see the real world demand coming in to the units that we've set up in Bucharest, in Vienna, in Warsaw, and throughout Europe.
Okay, Minister Sean Fraser, we've got to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
A pleasure as always. Thank you so much, Rosemary.